Today I'm going to compare the M1 MacBook Air to the Samsung Galaxy Book Pro 360. The MacBook Air is Apple's entry-level MacBook. It has the powerful M1 chip, an excellent display, a fantastic keyboard and trackpad, and it starts at $999. The Book Pro 360 is a 2-in-1, so it transitions from being a laptop to a tablet. It has an 11th generation i7 processor, an AMOLED display, which of course is also a touchscreen, and it starts at $1199. Both are thin, light, and portable. They're roughly the same price depending on the configuration, and there are both obvious and not so obvious differences. So let's talk about these two devices, cover the good and the bad, and see which one comes out on top. Starting out with what's included, we're gonna see a small and a major difference. As far as basics, both come with charging adapters and USB-C to USB-C cables. The MacBook Air comes with a 30-watt charging adapter, and the Book Pro 360 comes with a 65-watt fast charging adapter. The Book Pro 360 also includes an S Pen, which is a fantastic value, and it's definitely a tool that I used when I have it in tablet mode. I'll talk about this more throughout the video, but in terms of the overall value of each device, personally, I would factor the S Pen into the price. As far as form factor, both are the same width, but the MacBook Air is a bit deeper, which gives it a larger display and a larger palm rest. Now looking at the height, the Book Pro 360 is slightly thinner at 0.45 inches or 11.5 millimeters versus 0.63 inches or 16 millimeters on the MacBook Air. When I had both devices in different bags and backpacks, I didn't really notice a difference, but when it comes to actually using them, the MacBook Air definitely feels bigger. Now the added thickness on the MacBook Air also results in a more solid build. You can see that there's definitely flex on the keyboard plate of the Book Pro 360, whereas the MacBook Air is much more sturdy. Of course, the Book Pro 360 is a 2-in-1, so the display rotates 360 degrees, and you're able to use it just like you would a tablet, but with desktop apps. Personally, I like the fact that I can take notes or mark up PDFs and images with the S Pen, and this sometimes saves me from having to use a tablet. Now looking at ports, the MacBook Air has two USB-C ports on the left, both of which are Thunderbolt/USB 4 ports. And on the right, we have a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. The Book Pro 360 has two ports on the left, one of which is a Thunderbolt port, and then on the right side, we're getting another USB-C port, a micro SD card slot, and a headphone jack. The choice comes down to what you actually plan on doing with these devices. The MacBook Air gives you two more powerful ports, but for how I use them, I preferred the Book Pro 360. And here's why. First, I have more ports, so it's less likely that I'm going to need to use a USB-C hub. Second, I have USB-C ports on both sides, so it's much more convenient for both charging and for attaching accessories. And finally, the micro SD card slot gives me the option of essentially increasing the internal storage. I just priced out a couple of options, and for around $200, I can add a 1 terabyte micro SD card. Plus, as time goes on, the cost of micro SD cards is going to go down and the capacity is going to go up. Now moving on to the displays, both are 13.3 inches, but we're looking at two different types. The MacBook Air has an IPS Retina DCI-P3 display with a maximum brightness of 400 nits. The Book Pro 360 has an AMOLED display with bright colors and deep blacks. And both displays are beautiful, and they'll work great for any type of office work, for watching content, as well as for photo and video editing. The Book Pro 360 is more contrasty and saturated, and that's true both when you're watching regular content and HDR content. Now remember that if you are planning on watching HDR content on this laptop, you need to enable it by going to Display Settings, then activating the Use HDR option. The Book Pro 360 also lets you change between the default Vivid AMOLED profile, Natural, which is sRGB, Adobe RGB for photo editing, and then DCI-P3 for watching movies. Ultimately, your choice is going to come down to how you want your display to look. Now, as far as size and resolution, the MacBook Air is the clear winner with a high resolution of 2560 by 1600 versus 1920 by 1080 on the Book Pro 360. Our advantage of the Book Pro 360 is that it has a touchscreen. Now this is obviously something that you need in tablet mode and when you're using the S Pen, but I was surprised at how often I used it even in just laptop mode. And because I switch between my phone, a tablet with a keyboard case, and then the laptop so often, there are a lot of times where I just instinctively reach for the display when I want to scroll or select something. With the MacBook Air, I reach and then obviously I go back to the trackpad. It's not a big deal. But with the Book Pro 360, it's nice that when I make that mistake and reach for the display, I can still scroll or select something from the screen. Another display related feature that's available with both devices is the ability to wirelessly use a tablet as a secondary display. So I can grab one of my iPads and then with Sidecar use it with the MacBook Air, or I can grab my S7 or S7 Plus and use them with the Book Pro 360. Both work really well, and this is a feature that I use all the time. Now next, let's talk about the keyboard and trackpads on both of these devices. Starting with the keyboards, both are very similar in terms of size, and the keys are big and nicely spaced. Both devices use an inverted T for the arrow keys, and both include a row of function keys at the top. When it comes to actually typing, I prefer the MacBook Air keyboard. The keys seem to have better feedback, and they feel like they have a little more spring to them, so I don't find myself pressing as hard. The MacBook Air also has a larger wrist rest, so there's more room for my hands, and then reaching the lower row of letters is more comfortable. If I'm just typing a couple of lines, it's not really a big deal, but if I'm doing research for a video and I'm typing for a couple of hours, the MacBook Air is definitely more comfortable. Moving on to the trackpad, both are big and accurate, but the MacBook Air trackpad is definitely better. It's even larger, so there's more room to work with, and you can also click anywhere versus the Book Pro 360, which has a diving board design, so you can't click the top portion of the trackpad. I already mentioned the S Pen a few times, but since we're discussing input devices, I had to add it to the Book Pro 360's advantages. If it's not something you plan on using, then it's not really a benefit, but after using the Apple Pencil with my iPads and the S Pen with my Samsung tablets, it's definitely a tool that I appreciate having. As far as biometric authentication, both devices offer fingerprint sensors on the top right of the keyboard. So after the initial setup, you can use it to log in and authenticate without having to type your password. Now, both have worked really well for me so far, and I haven't found one to be better than the other. Now let's talk about the camera, microphone, and speakers. Now starting with the camera, both devices offer a 720p webcam, which is a pretty low resolution. Now I've been fairly critical of the webcam on the MacBook Air because I know Apple can do more, but it's definitely better than the Book Pro 360. I'll give you a sample of the camera and microphone on both devices, and let me know in the comments section which one you think is better. Here's a sample of what the webcam on the Book Pro 360 looks like. This will also give you an idea of what the microphone sounds like. I'm sitting in the exact same spot where I was filming the video with my lights on, so this will give you an idea of what the room looks like, and hopefully this gives you an idea of what you should expect. Here's a sample of the MacBook Air camera and microphone. As a point of reference, again, I have the same lighting that I have on during the video, so this should give you a pretty good idea of the image quality that you should expect and the audio quality. Now let's get to the speakers. The Book Pro 360 speakers sound like pretty average laptop speakers, so they're fairly hollow or tinny. The MacBook Air definitely has better speakers, they're louder, they sound fuller, and they're the clear winner for me. I'll play a sample for you, and again, let me know if you can hear the difference. If you've gotten value from this video, give it a thumbs up. It lets me know what kind of content you like so I can make more of it. And I still see that over 90% of you are new viewers, so hit that subscribe button. Now let's get to processing power. So neither of these devices are designed to be a pro device, but we do have the M1 chip on the MacBook Air and an 11th gen 2.8 GHz i7 on the Book Pro 360. Now personally, I don't care too much about benchmark scores. I care more about real life use, but let me quickly share Geekbench scores with you for those of you who are interested. For single core performance, the MacBook Air scored 1703 versus 1238 on the Book Pro 360. And for multi-core performance, the MacBook Air scored 7391 versus 5127 on the Book Pro 360. So that's a 38% improvement for single core performance and a 44% improvement for multi-core if you just look at the numbers. In real world situations, it's gonna depend on what you're doing. For basic stuff like surfing the web, working with web-based applications, doing office type work, and consuming content, you're not really going to notice a major difference. The MacBook Air will be snappier and a little more responsive, but both will work. Now, as you move into more demanding tasks like photo and video editing, that's where the MacBook Air with the M1 chip is gonna move ahead, and that improved performance will definitely be noticeable. The MacBook Air doesn't have any type of active cooling system or a fan, and the Book Pro 360 does have one. Now personally, I like that the MacBook Air is completely silent, and I haven't really noticed a need for a fan. The system stays pretty cool, and unless I'm rendering a long video, I'm never really pushing it to its limit. On the other hand, the Book Pro 360 fan is definitely audible, and it comes on a lot if you have the system in high performance mode. You do have the options of turning it off, using it in silent mode, or in optimized mode, but then you're throttling back performance. But I will say that it is nice that you can turn it off if you're in a situation where you're intentionally willing to trade off silence for peak performance. Now this is a good transition into battery life so that we can see if performance impacts battery life. In this case, Samsung reports 20 hours of battery life for the Book Pro 360, and Apple reports 18 hours of battery life for the MacBook Air. Now, of course, your actual mileage will vary based on what tasks you're performing and the display brightness. For my use, I actually found that the MacBook Air lasted longer than the Book Pro 360. And that says a lot about the efficiency of the M1 chip. In this case, we're getting better performance and better battery life on the same machine. So if those are a priority for you, the MacBook Air is the better option. Now let's look at configuration options and pricing. And this is where Samsung made some interesting choices. So both devices start out with 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of internal storage. The MacBook Air costs $999 and the Book Pro 360 starts at $1199. And the Book Pro 360 has one other configuration option if you're looking at the 13-inch model. And that's 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of internal storage, and that's gonna cost you $1399. So that means that you can't upgrade the RAM or the internal storage independently of each other. You have to pick one of those two options. With the MacBook Air, you can add 8 gigs of RAM for $200 and then double the internal storage to 512 gigs for another $200. And that brings you to $1399, which is the same as the Book Pro 360 for that similar configuration. But we can continue to upgrade the internal storage of the MacBook Air all the way up to 2 terabytes for an extra $600. If you don't mind bringing along an external SSD, you can get some incredible speeds at very affordable prices, and I did a comparison of some of the most popular models, so I'll link to that video in just a moment. The Book Pro 360 also has an option of using the micro SD card slot as a way of expanding the internal storage. Both devices have their strengths and weaknesses, so it's important that you look at your specific needs. The MacBook Air is extremely powerful, has excellent battery life, best-in-class keyboard and trackpad, a high-resolution display, better camera, microphone, and speakers, and a more solid construction. The Book Pro 360 is smaller and lighter, has a really nice AMOLED display, a touchscreen. It's a 2-in-1, so you can use it in tablet mode. It includes an S Pen, it has more ports, and a micro SD card slot. Remember that I have links in the description to all the products that I talked about. Hopefully this video was helpful. Click on my face to subscribe and then watch one of these videos. You know what I always say? Buy it nice or buy it twice. Good luck and see you soon.